The lecture hall was filled with students from all across the galaxy. There were tall ones, short ones, some with tentacles and others with scales. They all came to learn about dangerous animals from different planets. The room buzzed with excited chatter as everyone found their seats. Jake Morrison sat near the middle of the room, trying not to draw attention to himself. He was the only human in the entire building. In fact, he was the only human at the Celestial Academy of Advanced Sciences. When he first arrived 6 months ago, everyone stared at him like he was some kind of monster. They still did, but at least now they tried to be polite about it. The problem was simple. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. That meant his home planet was considered one of the most dangerous places in the known galaxy. The gravity was too strong. The weather was too wild. The diseases were too deadly. And the animals were absolutely terrifying to most alien species. Jake did not feel like he came from a dangerous world. Sure, there were bears and sharks and poisonous snakes back home, but humans had lived with those things for thousands of years. People went camping in bear country. They swam in oceans with sharks. Kids played in yards where venomous spiders lived. It was just normal life. But to the other students, Jake was something to fear. His eyes faced forward like a hunter. His teeth included sharp canines designed for tearing meat. He stood upright on 2 legs, which apparently looked aggressive to many species. Even his smell was wrong, carrying the scent of a predator species. A blue-skinned student named Zara sat 3 seats away from Jake. That was the closest anyone ever sat voluntarily. She was from a peaceful world where the most dangerous animal was about as threatening as a rabbit. Her planet had never developed any major predators. When she first learned that Earth had animals that actively hunted and killed humans for food, she had been horrified. Professor Kelvin entered the room, his multiple eyes on stalks swiveling around to look at everyone. He was a Quelix, a species known for their intelligence and cautious nature. His species came from a world where they were near the bottom of the food chain. This made them excellent at avoiding danger. "Good morning, class," the professor said through his translation device. His actual speech was a series of whistles and clicks, but the device turned it into words everyone could understand. "Today we have a very special lesson. We will be examining live specimens from various worlds." The students perked up immediately. Live specimens were rare. Most classes used computer simulations or recorded videos. Actually seeing a dangerous creature in person was both exciting and frightening. "I must stress the importance of safety protocols," Professor Kelvin continued. "These creatures, while fascinating, can be dangerous if not handled properly. We will maintain appropriate distance and security measures at all times." An assistant named Vex rolled in a large metal container on wheels. The box was reinforced with extra locks and had warning labels all over it. Through the transparent top, students could see something moving inside. It had 6 legs and scales that sparkled like crystals in the light. "This is a Kresh predator from the planet Telonis 4, the professor announced proudly. "It is the apex predator of its ecosystem. Notice the sensory organs that help it track prey, and the venomous barbs along its spine for defense." Jake leaned forward to get a better look. The creature was about the size of a large dog. It paced back and forth in the container, clearly agitated by all the attention. Its scales shifted colors from blue to green as it moved. Jake thought it looked nervous. "The Kresh is from a Class 3 world," Professor Kelvin explained. "This classification means moderate danger levels compared to most Coalition worlds. Proper handling requires 3 trained technicians wearing full protective gear. Sedation equipment must always be on standby. Direct physical contact is forbidden except in the most extreme emergencies." Jake raised an eyebrow at this. "Class 3 world? Moderate danger? Back on Earth, a creature like this would probably be in a regular zoo. Kids would press their faces against the glass to watch it. Some wealthy people might even keep one as an exotic pet, assuming it was legal." The professor continued his lecture, explaining the Kresh's hunting patterns, diet, and reproductive cycle. The students took careful notes, their various appendages scribbling or typing away. Jake noticed that everyone seemed genuinely frightened of the creature in the box, as demonstrated by the security measures, Professor Kelvin said, indicating the reinforced container. "Even contained specimens require extreme caution. The Kresh has been responsible for 3 handler fatalities on its home world. 3 deaths from this animal." Jake thought about the statistics from back home. Domestic dogs killed more people than that every year in just one country on Earth. Cows killed even more. This crash was being treated like some kind of ultra-deadly monster, but it looked manageable to him. Of course, Jake kept these thoughts to himself. He had learned early on that comparing Earth's dangers to other worlds only made people uncomfortable. When he had casually mentioned that his little sister went hiking in areas with mountain lions, several students had filed complaints with the dean about traumatic content in casual conversation. The creche must never be approached without proper authorization and equipment, the professor emphasized. Its reflexes are extremely fast, and its venomous barbs can paralyze most species within seconds. Even with protective gear, maintain a minimum distance of 3 meters at all times. Jake watched the creature pace in its container. It kept looking at the crowd of students, its head swiveling to track movement. The body language reminded him of a dog he had fostered once. That dog had been scared of thunderstorms and would pace exactly like this when the weather turned bad. Nervous energy with nowhere to go. Vex, the assistant, stood next to the container with a control pad. He was carefully monitoring the creche's vital signs and behavior. His hands shook slightly as he worked. Even the trained professionals were afraid of this creature. "Now, are there any questions?" Professor Kelvin asked. Several hands and tentacles and other appendages rose into the air. Students asked about the creche's diet, its habitat, and its social structure. Jake half listened, more interested in watching the creature itself than hearing facts about it. Then something happened that would change everything. Vex was adjusting the controls on the container when his hand slipped. He pressed the wrong button. The front panel of the container began to slide open with a soft hissing sound. For one frozen moment, everyone in the room stared at the opening container. The creche stopped pacing. Its head snapped toward the gap that was growing wider with each second. Jake could see the exact moment when the creature realized it could escape. Time seemed to slow down. Jake's heart rate increased as his body prepared for action. Around him, other students were just beginning to realize what was happening. Then the creche moved and all chaos broke loose. The creche exploded out of the container like a coiled spring being released. It was fast, much faster than the videos had shown. In one fluid motion, it leaped from the box and landed in the center aisle between the rows of seats. Its crystalline scales flashed bright red, a warning color that meant danger. Pandemonium erupted instantly. Students screamed in dozens of different languages and sounds. Some ran for the exits, trampling over each other in their panic. Others froze in pure terror, their survival instincts telling them not to move. A few tried to hide under their desks. Professor Kelvin's eye stalks retracted into his head so fast it made a popping sound. He stumbled backward, tripped over his own legs, and fell to the floor. His translator device clattered away, sending out garbled sounds as it bounced across the ground. Vex, the assistant who had accidentally opened the container, simply fainted. His body crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. He hit the floor hard, but nobody stopped to help him. Everyone was too busy running for their lives. The creche stood in the aisle, its head swinging back and forth as it took in the chaos around it. Its scales pulsed from red to a deeper crimson. The venomous barbs along its spine stood straight up, fully extended. It opened its mouth and let out a sound that was half hiss, half shriek. Jake Morrison sat perfectly still in his seat. While everyone else ran or screamed or fainted, he watched the creature carefully. His brain was processing information at high speed, reading the creche's body language like a book. The creature was not hunting. It was scared. Jake could see it in the way the creche held its body, in how its eyes darted around without focusing on any one target. The red color was not aggression, but fear. The extended barbs were defense, not attack. The creature was overwhelmed and terrified. It reminded Jake of a time back in high school when a neighbor's dog had escaped during a thunderstorm. The dog had run into traffic, scared and confused, snapping at anyone who tried to approach. But Jake had seen past the aggressive display to the frightened animal underneath. He had calmed the dog and brought it home safely. This was the same situation, just with a different species and much higher stakes. Jake slowly stood up from his seat. The movement caught the creche's attention immediately. The creature spun to face him, dropping into a low crouch, its muscles tensed, ready to spring. The hissing sound grew louder, more intense. Around the room, the few students who had not yet escaped stopped and stared in horror. The human was standing up. The Deathworlder was approaching the predator. They were about to witness someone die. "Easy there," Jake said softly. His voice was calm and steady. despite the adrenaline pumping through his system. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The Kresh's head tilted slightly, as if confused by this strange reaction. Every other being in the room had either run away or frozen in fear, but this creature was speaking to it in a gentle tone while slowly moving closer. Jake took one careful step forward. He kept his movements slow and smooth, nothing sudden or threatening. His arms hung loose at his sides, not raised in a defensive position. He was trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. The Kresh hissed again, louder this time. Its scales flashed even brighter red, almost glowing now. The barbs on its spine quivered. It was giving every warning it could, telling this strange creature to stay back. But Jake had dealt with warning displays before. Dogs growled and showed their teeth. Cats hissed and arched their backs. Snakes coiled and rattled. These were all ways of saying, "Leave me alone," without actually fighting. The Kresh was doing the same thing, another step forward. Jake was now only about 3 meters away. Exactly the minimum safe distance the professor had mentioned. Except Jake did not feel like he was in danger. He felt like he was approaching a scared animal that needed help. "You're just confused, aren't you?" Jake said quietly. "All these weird smells, all these loud noises. You just want to feel safe again. One more step." The Kresh's hissing had decreased slightly in volume. It was still in a defensive crouch, still ready to attack if needed, but some of the panic seemed to be leaving its body. It was listening to Jake's voice. "That's good," Jake continued. "See, I'm not scary. Just a weird-looking thing that wants to help." Zara, the blue-skinned student, watched from the doorway with her mouth hanging open. She had studied Earth creatures in her xenobiology classes. She knew that humans were apex predators from a death world. But this human was not acting like a predator. He was acting like some kind of animal handler. Professor Kelvin had managed to crawl to a communications panel on the wall. His manipulator appendages shook as he activated the emergency channel. "Security," he gasped into the speaker. "Code red in Lecture Hall 7. Loose predator. Student in immediate danger. Send all available units." But Jake barely heard the professor's frantic call. His entire focus was on the Kresh in front of him. He was reading every tiny movement, every shift in color, every sound. He was having a conversation with this creature, even though neither of them spoke the same language. Jake slowly began to crouch down, lowering himself to appear less threatening. It was a risky move. Getting down at the creature's level put him in the perfect position to be attacked. His throat and face were now easily reachable. One lunge and the Kresh could seriously hurt him, but Jake trusted his instincts. The Kresh was not going to attack unless it felt cornered or threatened. And right now, Jake was making himself smaller, less intimidating. The Kresh watched this strange behavior with obvious confusion. Its head tilted the other direction now. The scales began to shift color, the red fading slightly toward orange. The barbs on its spine lowered just a tiny bit. "That's right," Jake said softly. "I'm not a threat. Just a friend." He slowly extended his hand, palm down. Fingers relaxed and slightly curved. It was the exact gesture he would use with a nervous dog. "Let the animal sniff you first. Let it investigate on its own terms. Never force contact." The Kresh stared at Jake's hand. Its nostrils flared as it took in his scent. Jake could see the creature's pupils dilating and contracting as it processed this new information. Humans probably smelled strange to it, different from any species it had encountered before. Seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. The lecture hall was completely silent now except for someone's ragged breathing near the exit. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. The Kresh took a small step forward, then another. Its body was still tense, still ready to flee or fight, but curiosity seemed to be winning over fear. This strange creature in front of it was not behaving like anything it understood. "Come on," Jake thought. "Just a little closer. You can do it." The Kresh stretched its neck out, bringing its face closer to Jake's extended hand. The distance closed slowly, painfully slowly. Jake did not move, barely even breathed. He was a statue, patient and calm. Then finally, the Kresh's nose touched Jake's palm. The touch of the Kresh's nose against Jake's hand was cold and slightly damp. It reminded him of a dog's nose, just a bit cooler than expected. The creature sniffed carefully, taking in Jake's scent with obvious interest. Its nostrils flared wide with each breath. Jake remained perfectly still. He let the Kresh investigate him completely. This was the crucial moment, the point where the animal would decide if he was safe or dangerous. Everything depended on staying calm and non-threatening. The creche pulled its head back slightly, considering. Its scales were shifting colors again, moving from orange toward a more neutral green-blue. That was a good sign. The creature was calming down, moving away from the fear response. Then something amazing happened. The creche lowered its head and pressed the top of its skull against Jake's palm. It was the same gesture a cat might make when it wanted attention, or a dog asking to be petted. The universal language of animals seeking comfort. Jake felt the tension drain from his shoulders. He had been right about reading the creature's behavior. It was not a monster. It was just a scared animal in a strange place, and it had recognized that Jake was trying to help. Slowly, carefully, Jake began to scratch behind the ridge of bone where the creche's ears should be. He had no idea if this species even liked being touched there, but the creature's immediate response told him everything. The creche leaned into his hand, applying more pressure, clearly enjoying the sensation. The crystalline scales rippled through a whole rainbow of colors before settling on a warm golden tone. A low rumbling sound came from deep in the creature's chest. It was not quite a purr, not quite a growl, but definitely a sound of contentment. "Who's a good predator?" Jake murmured with a slight smile, his voice still quiet and soothing. "You are, yes you are. Just a big scary monster who wanted some scratches, weren't you?" From her position near the doorway, Zara felt like her understanding of reality was breaking apart. The supposedly deadly creche predator was nuzzling against the human like a pet. The apex predator from a Class 3 world was making happy sounds, while the Deathworlder scratched its head. This should not be possible. But it was happening right in front of her eyes. The doors to the lecture hall burst open with a loud bang. The security team rushed in, armed with neural disruptors and tranquilizer rifles. They were ready for a dangerous predator on the loose. They were ready for casualties. They were ready for chaos. What they were not ready for was the scene in front of them. The human student was crouched in the aisle, calmly petting the creche predator. The creche was leaning into the contact with its eyes half closed in obvious pleasure. Its scales glowed a peaceful gold color. There was no violence, no danger, no emergency at all. The head of security, a Vordani warrior named Creche that stands firm, stopped so suddenly that the team members behind him nearly crashed into his back. His weapon lowered slightly as he tried to process what he was seeing. The Vordani were known throughout the galaxy for their tactical skills and quick thinking. Creche that stands firm had seen many strange things in his long career, but he had never seen anything quite like this. "Stand down," Jake called out without taking his attention away from the creche. "He's calm now. No sudden movements, please. I don't want to spook him again." The human was giving orders to the security team. The human was protecting the predator. The human was treating the deadly creche like it was a harmless pet. Creche that stands firm made a quick decision and waved his team back. The security team lowered their weapons but remained alert. They formed a loose semicircle around Jake and the creche, ready to act if the situation changed. But for now they simply watched in amazement. "All right, buddy," Jake said softly to the creche. "Time to go back home. You've had enough excitement for one day." He slowly stood up, keeping one hand on the creature's head the whole time. The creche stood with him, staying pressed against his leg. It looked up at Jake with what might have been trust in its eyes. Together, human and predator began walking toward the container. The watching crowd held their breath. The security team tightened their grips on their weapons just in case. Professor Kelvin, who had managed to retrieve his translator device, watched with all his eye stalks fully extended. Jake walked slowly, matching his pace to the creche's movement. The creature stayed right beside him, occasionally bumping against his leg like a large dog on a walk. Its scales remained that peaceful gold color. When they reached the container, Jake gave the creche one final scratch behind the ears. "Okay, time to get back in. Come on, you can do it." The creche looked at the container. Then it looked at Jake, then back at the container. For a moment it seemed like the creature might refuse. Its scales flickered from gold to a slightly darker shade. I know, Jake said sympathetically. "You don't want to go back in the box. But it's safe in there, and they'll take you home soon, back to your own world." The creche made a sound that seemed almost reluctant, a soft whine that tugged at Jake's heart. But then slowly it climbed back into the containment unit. It turned around once inside, looking at Jake through the transparent top. Jake closed the door and carefully engaged all the locks. making sure everything was secure. He double-checked each one, not wanting any more accidents today. The whole time the creche watched him with those intelligent eyes. "Good boy," Jake said quietly, tapping the transparent surface. "You did great." As soon as the container was secured, the lecture hall erupted in noise. Students who had fled began cautiously returning, talking rapidly in dozens of languages. Those who had stayed were chattering excitedly. The security team lowered their weapons completely but looked no less confused. "How did you do that?" Zara was the first to speak clearly, her voice high with shock. "That creature could have killed you, but it didn't want to kill me," Jake replied simply. "It was just scared. Wouldn't you be scared if you suddenly found yourself in a strange place full of creatures you'd never seen before?" "But the protocols," another student stammered. "The safety measures. 3 trained handlers in protective gear." Jake shrugged. "I've handled scarier things back home. This little guy isn't really that dangerous if you know how to read animal behavior." "Little guy?" someone squeaked. "That's a Class 3 predator." "Yeah," Jake agreed. "And back on Earth we have Class 12 predators. This is like comparing a house cat to a tiger." The students stared at him in stunned silence. A house cat was already considered a dangerous animal by many coalition species. The idea that there were creatures on Earth that made the creche look harmless by comparison was almost too much to process. Professor Kelvin slowly approached Jake, still maintaining what he considered a safe distance. "Student Morrison, your actions today were extraordinarily reckless. You violated every safety protocol we have, but nobody got hurt," Jake pointed out. "In fact, I'd say it worked out pretty well." The professor's eye stalks quivered with what Jake had learned was frustration. "That is not the point, Student Morrison. You could have been killed. The creche has killed trained handlers before." Jake considered this for a moment. "With respect, Professor, I think those handlers probably approached it wrong. If you come at a scared animal with weapons and restraints, of course it's going to fight back. But if you show it you're not a threat, most animals will calm down." "Most animals," the professor repeated slowly. "But not all animals. What if you had been wrong about the creche's behavior?" "Then I would have backed off," Jake said simply. "I was watching it the whole time. If it had shown actual hunting behavior instead of fear behavior, I wouldn't have approached. But I grew up around animals. I know the difference." "Creche that stands firm," the security chief stepped forward. "Human Morrison, I have been in security for 20 years. I have handled hundreds of dangerous situations. But I have never seen anyone do what you just did. Would you be willing to teach my team your methods?" Jake blinked in surprise. Teach security personnel? He had just calmed down one scared animal. That hardly made him an expert. But then he thought about it more carefully. These people really did not understand animal behavior the way humans did. Earth had forced humanity to learn these skills over thousands of years. "I guess I could show you some basics," Jake said. "Though honestly, I'm not even that good with animals compared to some people back home. My little sister Amanda is studying to be a veterinarian. She's way better at this stuff than I am." There was a collective intake of breath from the assembled students. If this human, who claimed to be only average at handling animals, could befriend a Class 3 predator so easily, what could a true expert do? The implications were staggering. A student near the back raised a tentacle. "What other creatures do you have on Earth that are more dangerous than the creche?" Jake scratched his head, thinking. "Well, there are grizzly bears. They can weigh up to 800 pounds and have enough strength to flip over a boulder. Saltwater crocodiles that can bite with more force than almost any other animal. Great white sharks that can detect a single drop of blood in an Olympic swimming pool. Tigers, lions, leopards, jaguars. Venomous snakes like black mambas and inland taipans. Box jellyfish that can kill you in minutes. Hippos that kill more people than any large predator in Africa." He paused, noticing the horrified expressions around him. "And that's just the big obvious stuff. We also have poisonous spiders, scorpions, parasites, disease-carrying insects. Oh, and some plants are dangerous too. Poison ivy gives you a painful rash, and there's this thing called a jimpy tree in Australia that can cause pain for months if you touch it." The lecture hall was completely silent. Several students looked like they might faint. Zara had gone from blue to a pale, almost white color. "But people live there," a student finally said weakly. "How do you survive?" Jake shrugged again. "You learn the rules. Don't bother the bears and they usually won't bother you. Don't swim in crocodile-infested waters. Wear shoes in snake country. Check your boots for scorpions if you live in the desert. It's just common sense stuff. Common sense, Professor Kelvin repeated faintly. Checking your footwear for venomous creatures is common sense on your world. Well, yeah, Jake said. I mean, it's not like you find scorpions everywhere, just in certain areas. Most people go their whole lives without seeing one. This explanation did not seem to comfort anyone. Another student, a crystalline being named Quartz 7, spoke up in a tinkling voice. Do humans keep any of these creatures as pets? Oh, sure, Jake said cheerfully. Dogs are descended from wolves, which are pack hunters. Cats are small predators that we invited into our homes to kill pests. Some people keep snakes, lizards, even spiders as pets. There are farms where you can visit and pet animals like sheep, goats, pigs. Kids do it all the time. Children, Quartz 7 said slowly, are allowed to touch unknown creatures for entertainment. They're not unknown, Jake corrected. They're farm animals. Domestic species that have been living with humans for thousands of years. Though I guess some of them can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. People get kicked by horses sometimes, and cows kill more people annually than sharks do. Your domesticated animals kill people, someone whispered. Well, usually by accident, Jake said. They're big and heavy, so if they get spooked or step on you wrong, people can get hurt. But that's pretty rare. Millions of people interact with farm animals every day without any problems. Kresh that stands firm had been listening to this exchange with growing fascination. Human Morrison, I am beginning to understand something. Your species does not see these creatures as unusual dangers. You have normalized living alongside predators and venomous animals. I guess so, Jake agreed. I mean, they're just part of life, you know? You learn about them, you respect them, and you go about your day. Most of the time, they want nothing to do with humans anyway. Professor Kelvin's eye stalk swiveled as he processed this information. Student Morrison, I believe I owe you an apology. When the exchange program first informed me that a human would be joining my class, I had serious reservations. Your species' reputation as Deathworlders made me concerned for the safety of my other students. Jake felt a pang of sympathy for the professor. He had noticed the careful distance everyone maintained from him, the nervous looks, the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. It had been lonely. However, the professor continued, Today you have demonstrated something I had not considered. The very experiences that make your world so dangerous have given your species unique insights. You read the Kresh's behavior in a way that none of us could. You saw fear where we saw aggression. You offered comfort where we offered force. I just did what made sense, Jake said modestly. What makes sense to a human, Zara said quietly, is completely foreign to most of the galaxy. She approached Jake carefully, still maintaining about a meter of distance. I have been avoiding you since you arrived. I was taught that humans are dangerous predators. But watching you with the Kresh, I see something different. You did not dominate it or force it to submit. You communicated with it as an equal. Animals aren't our enemies, Jake explained. They're just trying to survive, same as us. Even predators don't hunt for fun. They hunt because they need to eat. If you understand that, if you respect them, you can usually find a way to coexist. This philosophy was revolutionary to most of the students. On their worlds, dangerous creatures were rare and were treated with extreme caution or avoided entirely. The idea of learning to live alongside them, of understanding them rather than fearing them, was a completely new concept. Professor Kelvin made a decision. This lesson has taken an unexpected turn, but I believe it has been valuable. Student Morrison, would you be willing to present a lecture on Earth fauna and human interaction methods? I believe the entire academy could benefit from your perspective. Jake hesitated. A lecture? In front of the whole academy? That sounded terrifying in a completely different way than facing a loose predator, but he saw the genuine interest in the faces around him. Maybe this could help people understand Earth better. Maybe it could help them understand humans better. Okay, he agreed. I can do that. The news of what happened in Lecture Hall 7 spread through the academy, faster than light-speed communications. By the time Jake made it back to his dormitory, his message inbox was flooded with requests. Students wanted interviews. Professors wanted consultations. The campus news network wanted a full feature story. Jake sat on his bed, staring at the hundreds of unread messages with growing anxiety. He had just calmed down one scared animal. Why was everyone treating him like he had done something impossible? But he was beginning to understand. What seemed simple and obvious to him was genuinely groundbreaking to everyone else. They had never needed to learn these skills because their worlds had never required it. Earth had shaped humanity in ways that other planets had not shaped their inhabitants. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Jake opened it to find Zara standing there looking nervous but determined. She was still keeping a respectful distance, but she had actually come to his room. That was progress. "Hi," Jake said. "What can I do for you?" Zara's tentacles twisted together in what Jake had learned was a sign of anxiety. "I wanted to apologize. I have been avoiding you all semester. I was afraid because you are from a death world, but today I saw that you are not what I expected." Jake smiled softly. "It's okay. I understand. Everyone here is scared of me at first. I'm used to it, but you should not have to be used to it," Zara said firmly. "Today you showed incredible skill and compassion. You risked yourself to protect everyone in that room, including the creche itself. That is not the behavior of a monster." "Thanks," Jake said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." Zara hesitated, then took a small step closer. "Would you tell me more about Earth? Not the scary parts that we learn in Deathworlder studies. Tell me about the good parts. What is it like to live there?" For the next hour, Jake talked about his home. He described the forests where he used to hike, where you might see deer and rabbits and occasionally a bear from a safe distance. He talked about the ocean beaches where families played in the surf, even though sharks swam somewhere beneath the waves. He explained how people had gardens where they grew food, and how birds and squirrels and sometimes raccoons would visit. Zara listened with fascination. "Your world is full of danger, but you have made peace with it. You do not live in fear." "We can't live in fear," Jake explained. "If we spent all our time being afraid, we would never leave our houses. So we learn, we adapt, and we respect the things that can hurt us. Most of the time, that's enough." Over the next few days, Jake found that his social situation at the academy had completely changed. Students who had previously avoided him now approached him with questions. They wanted to understand Earth, to understand humans, to understand how Deathworlders thought. He started an informal study group in his dorm room. A dozen students would gather 3 times a week, and Jake would talk about Earth animals. He showed them videos from back home explaining animal behavior and body language. He taught them the difference between aggression and fear, between a warning and an attack. One evening, Court 7 raised a manipulator appendage. "Human Jake, I have a question. You mentioned your sister who studies animal medicine. Are there many humans who work directly with dangerous creatures?" Jake nodded. "Oh yeah, tons. We have wildlife biologists who study animals in their natural habitats, zookeepers who care for everything from penguins to elephants, marine biologists who swim with sharks and whales, park rangers who manage wildlife in protected areas, veterinarians who treat sick or injured wild animals. It's actually a pretty popular career path." The students exchanged glances. The idea that humans voluntarily chose to work closely with dangerous animals was still hard for them to comprehend. "Do any of these humans get hurt?" Zara asked. "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "Wildlife work can be dangerous, but good training and proper respect for the animals keeps most people safe, and the ones who do this work, they love it. They think it's worth the risk to help protect and understand these creatures." Meanwhile, Kresh that stands firm had been true to his word. He arranged for Jake to conduct training sessions with the Academy security team. Jake taught them the basics of reading body language, recognizing stress signals, and de-escalating tense situations without using force. The security personnel were professional and skilled, but they approached every dangerous situation with weapons and restraints ready. Jake showed them an alternative approach. Sometimes, he explained, the best weapon is patience. Sometimes the best restraint is understanding. They were skeptical at first, but after a few practical demonstrations with increasingly agitated creatures from the biology department, they began to see the value in his methods. Response times improved. Injuries decreased. The animals in the lab were noticeably calmer. Professor Kelvin invited Jake to collaborate on a research paper about cross-species communication and behavior interpretation. The paper would compare human methods with traditional coalition approaches and could potentially change how the entire galaxy handled wildlife management. 2 weeks after the incident with the creche, Jake gave his promised lecture to the entire academy. The main auditorium was packed to capacity, with students sitting in the aisles and standing along the walls. Even the faculty had turned out in large numbers. Jake stood at the podium looking out at the sea of faces and forms. He took a deep breath. "Okay, so today I want to talk about living with danger. Not how to avoid it or fight it, but how to understand it and coexist with it. He started with simple concepts: how to recognize fear versus aggression, how to make yourself non-threatening, how to give an animal space to feel safe. He used videos from Earth, showing humans interacting with everything from house pets to wild bears. The audience was riveted. They watched a video of a human swimming with dolphins and gasped at the trust displayed. They saw footage of a park ranger gently relocating a venomous snake and marveled at the calm confidence. They observed children at a petting zoo and could not believe these younglings were allowed to touch living animals. The thing you have to understand, Jake explained, is that humans are not fearless. We feel fear just like everyone else. But we have learned to work with that fear instead of being controlled by it. We assess the risk, we take appropriate precautions, and then we move forward. A professor from the biology department raised a tentacle. Human Morrison, you say humans feel fear, but you approach the creche without any visible fear response. How is this possible? Jake thought carefully about his answer. I was scared. My heart was pounding. My adrenaline was up. But I have been trained through experience and education to function despite that fear. It is like, imagine if you had to do a difficult math problem while scared. The fear does not stop you from thinking. It just makes it harder. You can think clearly while experiencing fear, the professor said slowly, as if this was a revolutionary concept. Most humans can. Yeah, Jake confirmed. It is a useful skill when your world regularly tries to kill you. The lecture continued for 2 hours. By the end, Jake had covered everything from basic animal psychology to advanced de-escalation techniques. He had answered hundreds of questions and shown dozens of videos, and he had fundamentally changed how many beings in the audience thought about dangerous creatures. As the crowd filed out, many students stopped to thank Jake personally. Some asked for copies of his notes. Others wanted to schedule private tutoring sessions. A few just wanted to shake his hand, having overcome their fear of the human Deathworlder. Professor Kelvin approached last, his eye stalks swiveling with what Jake had learned to recognize as pleasure. Student Morrison, that was exceptional. I believe you have started something important here today. The Academy Board has asked me to extend an invitation. They would like you to develop a full course on Deathworlder survival skills and animal behavior. It would be an elective open to all students. Jake felt a surge of pride. Me, teach a course? You have knowledge that is unique in the galaxy, the professor said. Knowledge that could save lives and advance our understanding of dangerous fauna. Will you do it? Jake looked around the auditorium, thinking about how much had changed in just 2 weeks. He had gone from being the feared Deathworlder that everyone avoided to someone who could help others understand the universe a little better. Yes, he said with a smile. I will do it. 3 months after the creche incident, Jake Morrison stood in front of his first official class as an instructor. The room was smaller than the main auditorium but still held 40 students. They represented 12 different species, all eager to learn what the human Deathworlder had to teach. Welcome to Introduction to Deathworlder Animal Behavior, Jake said, still getting used to the title. I know that is a long name. You can just call it Animal Behavior if you want. Today we are going to start with the basics of understanding body language across different species. The class went well. Jake had spent weeks preparing, working with Professor Kelvin to develop a curriculum that would be useful for non-humans. He taught them to look past their instinctive fear responses and observe what an animal was actually communicating. After class, Zara approached his desk. She had become a regular fixture in Jake's life, often studying with him and helping him adapt his teaching materials for different species. Her fear of humans had completely disappeared, replaced by genuine friendship. That was a good first lesson, she said. Though I think you made it sound too easy. Reading body language takes practice. Everything takes practice, Jake agreed. But the important thing is getting started. Once people realize that dangerous animals are not mindless monsters, they can begin to understand them. Jake's communicator buzzed with an incoming message. It was from the Academy Board. They wanted to see him in their office immediately. Zara wished him luck as he headed across campus, wondering what they wanted. The board consisted of 5 senior professors from different departments. They sat in a semicircle, their various forms arranged around a central podium. Jake stood before them, trying not to feel intimidated. Student Morrison, the head of the board, began. She was a Lumina, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell. We have been monitoring your progress with great interest. Your class is the most popular elective we have ever offered. Your training sessions with security have reduced wildlife-related incidents by 70%, and your research collaboration with Professor Kelvin is attracting attention across the entire coalition. Thank you, Jake said carefully, not sure where this was going. We have received inquiries from 17 other institutions. The Lumina continued. They all want to know if we would be willing to share your teaching methods. Some are asking if you would consider visiting their campuses to lecture, and several governments have expressed interest in training their wildlife management personnel using your techniques. Jake blinked in surprise. Governments? That seemed excessive for what he was teaching. You must understand. Another board member said, a Quelix elder even older than Professor Kelvin. The coalition has struggled with wildlife management for centuries. We lose researchers every year to preventable incidents with dangerous fauna. Your methods could save thousands of lives across hundreds of worlds. I am just teaching basic stuff that every human learns, Jake said. It is not revolutionary. To humans, perhaps, the Lumina agreed. But to the rest of the galaxy, your knowledge is unique and valuable. We would like to establish a center for Deathworlder studies here at the Academy, with you as the founding director. Jake sat down heavily in a nearby chair, not caring if it was proper protocol. A center directing something? He was 22 years old and still technically a student himself. I know this is unexpected, the Lumina said kindly. You came here as an exchange student, but you have demonstrated abilities and knowledge that we desperately need. You would have full support staff, significant funding, and the authority to develop comprehensive training programs. What about my regular studies? Jake asked. I still have 2 years left before I graduate. You would continue your education while directing the center, another board member explained. In fact, your work with the center would count toward your degree requirements. You would essentially be conducting research and teaching simultaneously. Jake thought about his little sister Amanda, studying veterinary medicine back on Earth. He thought about all the wildlife biologists, zookeepers, and animal experts he had met growing up. They had made learning about dangerous creatures seem like the most natural thing in the world. Can I bring in other humans? Jake asked. Because honestly, you need more than just me. You need people who really know what they are doing. Real experts, not just a college student who grew up around animals. The board members looked at each other. More humans? Here at the Academy? If we are really going to do this right, Jake said, gaining confidence, we need a team. Wildlife biologists who can teach field observation. Zookeepers who can demonstrate proper handling techniques. Maybe even some animal trainers who can show how positive reinforcement works. My sister Amanda knows more about animal medicine than I ever will. She could teach a whole course just on veterinary care. The Lumina's glow brightened with what might have been excitement. You are proposing a comprehensive program with multiple human instructors, each bringing different expertise. Yes, Jake said firmly. If the coalition really wants to learn how Deathworlders handle dangerous creatures, then let us show you properly. Not just theories and lectures, but actual hands-on training from people who do this work every day on Earth. The board went into a quick consultation, their communication happening too fast for Jake to follow. Finally, the Lumina turned back to him. Your proposal is accepted. We will fund positions for up to 10 human experts in various fields of animal management and behavior. You will coordinate the program and help us understand which specialties we need most. Jake left the board chambers in a daze. He had just committed to something huge. He immediately called home, despite the communication delay between Earth and the Academy. His sister Amanda's face appeared on the screen, several minutes later after the signal reached Earth and her response came back. Jake, what is going on? Your message sounded urgent. How would you like to come teach veterinary medicine to aliens? Jake asked. Because I may have just gotten us funding to bring a whole team of Earth animal experts to an alien university. Amanda's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then pure excitement. Are you serious? Alien species? New biological systems to study? Jake, that is literally my dream job. What happened? Jake explained everything, from the creche incident to the establishment of the new center. Amanda listened with growing enthusiasm, already making plans and asking about what kind of facilities would be available. Over the next few months, the Center for Deathworlder Studies took shape. Amanda arrived first along with 3 other experts that Jake had recruited. There was Carlos, a wildlife biologist who specialized in large predators. There was Linda, a zookeeper with 30 years of experience. And there was Ben, an animal behaviorist who had worked with everything from dolphins to elephants. The team immediately began developing comprehensive courses. They brought equipment, videos, and even some carefully selected live animals from Earth for demonstration purposes. The Academy built new facilities to house these creatures safely, designed according to human specifications. The first time Carlos gave a lecture on tracking large predators, complete with actual bear scat samples for students to analyze, half the class fainted, but they came back the next week, fascinated despite their fear. Linda's course on enrichment and animal welfare changed how the entire academy treated their research specimens. Creatures that had been kept in bare cages were suddenly given toys, puzzles, and environmental enrichment. The improvement in their health and behavior was dramatic and immediate. Ben's work with the security team revolutionized their protocols. Instead of using force as a first response, they learned to read situations and respond appropriately. Incidents dropped to nearly zero, and Amanda's veterinary courses became mandatory for anyone working with living specimens. She taught anatomy, physiology, and medical care, with a level of expertise that the coalition had never seen. Her students learned to treat research animals not as objects, but as living beings that deserved proper care. One day, Jake was walking across campus when he encountered the creche in its container, being transported to a new facility. He stopped and tapped on the transparent surface. The creature immediately perked up, its scales shifting to that warm gold color. It pressed against the side closest to Jake, clearly recognizing him. "Hey, buddy," Jake said softly. "Remember me?" The creche made that rumbling purr sound, and Jake smiled. This creature had changed his entire life. A single moment of connection between a scared animal and a human who understood fear had rippled outward to transform how an entire galactic civilization approached dangerous wildlife. Zara found him there, still talking quietly to the creche. "You visit that creature every week," she observed. "We have a bond," Jake said with a grin. He was scared. I helped him, and now we are friends. Zara watched the interaction with a thoughtful expression. "When you first arrived, I thought humans were monsters because you came from a world of monsters. But I understand now. You are not monsters. You are survivors who learn to see past the monsters to the living beings underneath. Every creature is just trying to survive," Jake said. "Even the dangerous ones, even the scary ones. Once you understand that, fear becomes respect, and respect becomes understanding. That should be the motto of your center," Zara suggested. Jake laughed.